Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Joe Naz Podcast. Today, we have one of my best friends and one of my favorite people on the planet here today, Doug Miller. Doug, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Joe.
So, for those of you that do not know Doug, Doug is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. He is someone who runs a circus during the weekends, and during the week, he is a clinical psychologist that has a degree in philosophy, educational psychology, counseling, and education administration. He works in school districts with children during the week where he is helping them deal with emotional trauma, mental stress, and problems that they deal with on a daily basis. And on the weekends, he runs a company called Zen Arts. Zen Arts is I would say the premier probably event party planning company in Los Angeles, and he's been doing this for over 15 years. And the events that he throws range from Cirque du Soleil type events. They range from parties for wealthy individuals that are trying to throw birthday parties, or parties that are just let's say corporate events where they are showing a new vehicle like for Ferrari or for a high brand. And so Doug has a lot of experience in that space. And today we're going to be exploring both sides of his life. We're going to be able to dive into what it's like to run Zen Arts and run a circus essentially for a living, and what it's like dealing with children and dealing with their trauma on a daily basis. So did I miss anything, Doug, or are we on point there?
We're on point. Yeah, we're good.
We're on point. So cool. So I wanted to start first. I'm interested in just hearing about your background when it comes to clinical psychology and dealing with children in general. Like, why did you end up going down that route? Because it sounds like these are completely opposite dynamics. And for me, I understand that sounds like a beautifully balanced life. You get to give back to the kids, you get to help them every single day, and then on the weekends, you get to live this life where you get to express yourself creatively, and you get a chance to do things from music to art to performing, and it's a completely different dynamic, and I think it's amazing and beautiful to observe.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's important to be an entrepreneur. I like being an entrepreneur and an artist. It's important for me to create art and to actually be able to express myself and be my own boss. And with that job, I get to travel the world as well. So there's all these perks, in entertainment and the arts, but also contribution's important for me. So I think, for me, life doesn't make sense for me if I'm not contributing somehow. And it wasn't that I wanted to be a psychologist and then it was kids. It was more like I want to work with children and families, and it ended up being psychology. So, when I got out of college, I thought I was going to go to law school like you, and I studied philosophy, and I got into law school, and pretty much a month or so before, attending law school, I was just like, it's not for me. I don't want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was a woman I was dating who was a daughter of a big celebrity, and this particular girlfriend, as she was a kid, and these other celebrities, kids had seen this psychologist, and so she was sort of a family friend and would hang out with us, at holidays and traveling and summer vacations, and I sort of fell in love with what she did. But even in college, I went to Pepperdine as an undergrad, and even when I was in college, my job was not a nanny per se, but I worked for a couple of different families where I would drive kids around, so I would make money driving kids to tennis camp or swim camp or horseback riding in Malibu. And I've just always loved being around kids. And I think there's something special and unique about children and the energy and the light they kind of bring, to anything. And so for me, it kind of just made sense. Hey, I don't want to be a lawyer. I'm going to work with kids. Yeah. And so then I wasn't doing art at the time. I went to graduate school and became a psychologist. And for me too, it's I don't know, I'm not the kind of psychologist that wants to have a clinic or work in an office. For me, it makes more sense to work in the natural environment of where these kids are at. So I've been working in schools since 2000. So I think it's going on 23 years. I've been a psychologist. I took a few years off in the middle of that when Zen Arts sort of ramped up. And it's a good balance. It's a difficult balance at the same time. It's difficult managing two full-time jobs, but also for psychology, for me, it's not a business. I have a contract with the school district. I'm not exchanging money with kids or with parents, and so it's a nice dynamic. I don't market that company. I don't have to run accounting with that company. I don't have all the entrepreneurial and responsibilities I have with running a business with psychology. It's a nice balance.
So it's you're working essentially as a salary job just for, is it for the government? Are these public schools, or are these private schools?
Yeah, public school.
Public schools. Is there a reason that you chose public schools over private schools?
I mean, initially when I got into this, I thought I wanted to work with more affluent and wealthy families and kids
Yeah.
because that's kind of what I was around.
Mm.
But as I started this job, I found immediately more benefit and success for myself working in inner cities. Working with more impoverished families and kids and more underprivileged families.
I'm sure that their problems are more severe and that you feel like you're probably having a greater impact on people that are struggling a bit more.
Well, they're different problems, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think like, wealthier families and affluent families, have a certain set of problems, but then, maybe underprivileged kids have a certain set of problems. It's not that one problem is worse or better necessarily, but
Yeah.
but they're just different problems, right?
Of course, because I mean, even though from an outside, right, this is something that I've like kind of tried to understand over the last couple of years, which is a lot of people try to rank like trauma or problems, right? But the truth of the matter is that even though from the outside it might seem that something is more severe, especially to a child versus something else, but the truth of the matter is to that child, even though it might seem like it's less severe, it's still as severe as what we might categorize in a different level. Because what they're experiencing is something that might be the worst case scenario for them. It might not be worst case scenario for us.
Yeah, I mean, also it's like even when work, because obviously I work with adults too, right? I work with teachers and parents on a daily basis, and working with adults tend to be more receptive and more open and more vulnerable when there's children involved also. So even in working with an adult, it's for me makes more sense when there's kids involved because people are more receptive to change, and vulnerability and more apt to look at themselves and reevaluate things, and they're more receptive to guidance and support.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think as adults, either we have a near death experience, which you probably deal with, right? Or we have a baby, and those are probably the two big sort of moments or events in an adult's life where we reevaluate ourselves and make change. I think we kind of set in our ways in a lot of way, and so we have a baby and all of a sudden life becomes we have a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
Or we almost die in a car accident and now we have a different perspective on life, right?
Yeah.
And I like that dynamic. It tends to create a container that's safe and vulnerable where we can all kind of like work together.
Got it. How interesting. And when you were pointing out earlier about making the decision not to go to law school, it brought up some thoughts for me. I had some friends when I first started law school that they thought they kind of wanted it, and then they ended up basically just spending a bunch of money on tuition, and then after a year realizing it's not for them. And I just wanted to make this comment: if you're thinking about law school, be serious about it. It's not for the faint of heart, and make sure it's something that you're really passionate about, because if you end up going for a year, you end up having this huge tuition, you have to pay for it out of pocket, and sure, you might get a loan for it, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, make sure it's something you really want to do, because it could end up being a year where you end up not going down that road. It could be a year wasted. I hate using that term. Obviously, you're going to learn some things going down that path, but just be sure about what you want before you go down that road.
Yeah, I think I saw that coming for me.
Yeah.
Or it's like, I think for me, when I really reevaluated, like what kind of lawyer would I want to be, or why would I do this? It's like all I really could come up with is like, I think I could see myself teaching at law school, right? And I think that was like, okay, I don't want to go through all this to be teaching,
Yeah.
And now that I'm older, actually, I could see myself using a law degree in a lot of different ways, right? Like being a lawyer, I think there's a lot of benefit and a lot of things I could be doing.
Yeah.
But I have a ton of lawyers and I've been involved in litigation and I kind of understand the legal process, especially like when it comes to like business litigation.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I didn't do that, because for me, I just couldn't think of a job that I'd be more miserable at, than being like a litigator.
Hey man, it's to each their own. But what I'll say about having a law degree is having a law degree will open doors to pretty much like any different avenue, right? And a lot of people are like, well, they don't think that because I obviously advertise myself as a personal injury attorney. They're like, oh, you can do criminal law, or you can do real estate. I'm like, yes, I could. It's not my specialty. I don't know much about it, but it really just opens doors. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits of being a lawyer, but you're absolutely right. When it comes to the emotional stress and the stuff that we have to deal with every single day, I was joking with a friend the other day. I was like, they're like, well, dude, like, what is your job really like? I'm like, well, I just feel like I'm a professional explosion handler. Like, people just call me with all of their life when it's falling apart. There's all kinds of issues. Somebody's dying, somebody's injured, somebody robbed me, my partner screwed me. I got, somebody that was close to me did this to me. It's never, oh yeah, I'm calling just to say hi or I'm doing good. It ends up being a very emotionally taxing job, but you're also dealing with that on the psychology side of things too.
Mm.
And I've even joked sometimes too to say, like, in some ways I'm almost like a therapist where I'm listening and trying to help people process their problems, but then also afterwards trying to like solve their problems.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for you would be, in the day of a psychologist, especially dealing with these kids, what does that look like? Are you just like sitting in there and there's specific children that come in? Do they seek you? Or like, do you see kids that you need to reach out to based on, let's say maybe their grades are failing, or they just see that there's an issue? Like, how does that work?
I mean, I've got a couple different responsibilities. Like, I mean, well, let's just talk about this week, for example. Like yesterday, the principal brings 3 kids to my office, right? I'm at a school in West Hollywood, and the principal brings 3 kids to my office, and they're probably 8 years old, and the 3 kids were on the schoolyard, basically acting out and mimicking a video game where they were shooting each other and brains were exploding, and then they were reviving each other after they were dead. And the teacher of this class had a real emotional reaction to that, you know, and actually like had a physical reaction, an emotional reaction. And so these little kids, you know, were crying basically, and the principal brought them to my office, and then, you know, I sat with them for maybe 30 minutes and just talked to them about the importance and how serious and sensitive gun violence is, you know, in the school setting. Okay. Now, you know, and these kids were receptive to that, and then I have to call their parents, right, and talk to their parents about, like, you know, your kid was like, you know, shooting another kid, you know, pretending on the school campus, and teacher, you know, people had emotional reactions to that. At the same time, the same school, last week, a mom was walking her daughter, 6-year-old daughter, to school at the crosswalk that connects to the school, right? So there's tons of children there, parents, teachers, all kind of arriving at school at 8 a.m. in the morning. And the mom's 35 years old. And a guy came swerving around the corner in a truck, like a work truck, and he hit both the mom and the daughter. So the mom was killed instantly.
Jesus.
And the daughter was put in the hospital. She's still on life support. You know, we don't know if she'll make it. And if she does make it, I don't know that she's going to be, you know, mentally there.
Yeah, she's not going to be the
same. So this has impacted that community, the school district, you know. So in the last, you know, 2 weeks, basically, we've been doing crisis counseling with children and with parents and with teachers. It's been pretty emotional. So there's a lot of trauma there, and there's a lot of crisis intervention. I do a lot of evaluations for kids. So for teachers or parents that are concerned that children may not be learning for whatever reason, could be dyslexia or ADHD or autism. You know, I'm the one that assesses for that. So I kind of like, I got like an investigator or detective in a way where I'll assess a child for autism, you know, and that requires me looking through the child's records, observing the child in the classroom, on the schoolyard, interviewing the parents, interviewing the teacher, actual testing. I take the kids and give them actual, you know, neuropsychology type tests, and then writing an evaluation report, you know, making a diagnosis per se and a recommendation. And then we decide, okay, this child's autistic based on my evaluation. And then there's a team at the school that I'm part of. We develop an educational plan for those kids. So I'm responsible for developing goals and objectives and providing support, whether it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, counseling. So I help the schools evaluate these kids, to design the educational programs. And then I also do counseling. I do therapy. So I have a caseload of kids and these kids have disabilities of some kind, and they have a prescription, like an actual like legal document that says they need to get counseling 30 minutes a week or 30 minutes every other week. So I'm pulling kids in groups and individually and doing counseling. But every day is sort of different. No day is the same, because there's all of these things come up, these different crisis situations. And I think now more than ever, mental health, you know, is there's a huge focus on mental health. I think since COVID especially, now we're being leaned on even more, you know, so than we have, and probably the whole time in the last 20 some years.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you say mental health, right, I think that a lot of people might have been scared about mental health before. And I think it's becoming more and more acceptable to just even get a counselor and speak to a therapist. And I mean, I've had my own therapist where I've spoken to them for a couple of years, and it's been greatly beneficial to me. But there was a couple things, like when you were speaking right now, right? Like a lot of what you told is like what you do and how you do it, like on the back end of things. I'm specifically interested in, so let's use a couple examples that you gave us, which I would like to see, like So you talked about, first of all, the kids basically mimicking a video game where they were shooting, and you're talking about gun control, and you're educating them. So I guess on your end, in that specific circumstance, what I'm interested is, like, in specific circumstances, like, what are some of the tools that you use, and how do you try to get somebody that's 8 years old who might not understand much of anything to really try to understand what you're trying to explain to them so that they can make a change in their lives? Because you're dealing with kids that haven't fully developed. They might not understand complex topics. And so what tools do you use to help them understand? Or is it more just like an expression of like an emotion and trying to help them feel it that way? Like, what are the things that you do to try to get them to understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is understanding like the developmental stage of where a child's at, right? So there's a different way you talk to a 5-year-old, versus a 2-year-old or an 8-year-old, for example. So I think it's understanding developmental stages, and being able to have honest conversation and maybe speak in different language and different vocabulary. There's different activities. I mean, there are instances where there might be I do play therapy. If the children are really developmentally delayed or very young, it might be through drawings, activities, social stories, scenarios. There's a whole like kind of like toolbox that's used depending on what the situation is. But there's curriculum, there's some counseling curriculum that I might utilize.
Well, what does like play therapy do for a child? Let's use that example.
I mean, like, for example, if a child is being like maybe sexually abused or molested at home, and the child's very young, maybe using a doll or like a play set, like a kitchen set or a bedroom set, we can kind of like, create a story, and sometimes the children will act these things out and talk about them, like where a 5-year-old may not be able to tell you that their dad's molesting them, right? But maybe they're taking a doll and playing with their private parts or talking in daddy's voice, there's different ways to kind of play through some of these scenarios.
How interesting. And so, and interesting is probably not the right term, but just like trying to understand like how you guys are trying to find out what's going on with them internally, and it's by observing them in a way. And so when a situation like that does occur, let's say that you feel that a child might be being molested or going through that type of scenario, let's say that you determine that based on the way they're playing with the doll, what are your duties, or what do you do next? Do you report it to the authorities, or do you reach out to the parent, or what are those steps like?
I mean, if there's like physical or even like verbal abuse, we have specific requirements by state and law to report, to Department of Children and Family Services. So it's not my job in that scenario to investigate. It's more like there's a whole different Department of Family Services and social services that gets involved. So, yeah, I mean, just like anyone on the school campus that's an employee, for example, a teacher, an office clerk, or myself or a principal, we have like legal obligations and responsibilities to report whenever a child's in danger of hurting themselves or others or being, potentially abused. And then there's a different, state department that investigates that.
Got it. Okay, so I want to ask a question. So obviously you've dealt with everything from young children to high schoolers, correct? Is that the range?
Yeah, preschool to high school. Yeah,
So-
pretty much. I'd say like age 2 to 22 is probably the age range.
Okay. So my question is, what are some of the most prevalent things that you're seeing now on a regular basis, especially now that the pandemic is over? What are some of the main mental and emotional crises that are going on a regular basis? Maybe the top 3 that you see on a regular day by day.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like the biggest problem now since COVID for children in schools is the amount of learning loss there was. So, not everyone was successful on Zoom and they just missed school. So the problem is that whether you're a kindergarten student or you're a middle school child or you're in college, it's if you had Zoom for a year and a half and you didn't have Zoom, but your school was on Zoom. Maybe you didn't participate. Maybe you're in your pajamas. Maybe you just didn't really benefit from Zoom. So you missed. There's a lot of children that have missed that chunk of time, but they're still held accountable for the same standards. So in kindergarten, they're learning to read, right? They're learning the alphabet. They're learning their sounds. And if they had kindergarten on Zoom, they missed that. But now they're in first grade or second grade. But they're expected they're being held to the same standards in first or second grade. So it's as if they're expected to have gone through kindergarten. So for me, I'm dealing with a lot of that and there's repercussions, not just academically, socially, and emotionally. I think a lot of families, COVID puts so much stress on humans in general, financially, socially, and that's trickled down. And I think I don't, at least in my lifetime, children have never been taken off the schoolyard, not for this amount of time. They haven't been taken away from the soccer game. They haven't been taken away from their friends. Like, it's like we took children and we put them at a desk at home or on their bed by themselves. Some, only children, right? Like no siblings. And some
Yeah.
families weren't even interacting with other children at all. And I don't think
No.
that's ever really happened, at least in the last couple of centuries.
Yeah.
And so there's just massive social impact, emotional impact, learning impacts.
Yeah.
So I'm assessing kids more than I ever have, for example, like for disabilities, because these kids are like in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and they're not reading and writing, and they're having massive problems. So everyone's like, they must have a disability, and that's not necessarily the case. And then I think, a lot of families are still struggling, financially and emotionally. Relationships have ended, marriages have split up. I mean, there's been a lot of different factors, and I don't know that it's one overlying dynamic other than the COVID situation. And that situation, just the fallout from that's been pretty drastic across the board.
Yeah. So it's interesting what you said. You've said a lot of things that it's heavy to hear it, right? Because I'm trying to comprehend what it would have been like to even be at that age, right? Having to skip a year of school, not being there in person. I mean, I consider myself a fully developed adult, right? And for myself, like, I know I don't learn half as effectively as when I watch a Zoom video than when I'm at, an educational, let's say I'm still going to a conference or somewhere where I learn in person. So I couldn't imagine being a child. And of course, some kids maybe thrive with the Zoom because they don't like the social pressures of being in a school and they do better online. But I'm guessing the majority of people struggled in some way or another. And now they're having to, the parents are having to try to figure it out, and I'm sure the educators are having to try to figure it out because now everyone's on different skewed scales and they have not received the same education. And I think a lot of it probably would go back to the type of parents, right? Are the parents there making sure they're doing it? Are they helping to guide them through this process? Or are they like, okay, here, just log on. You have to do this. I don't have time for you. And just essentially letting them do what they need to do and seeing if that happens.
Yeah, also, like, last year we came back to school, but we came back to school with masks on, you know? So imagine being 5 years old and having to wear a mask all year, and not even seeing another child's face, like not to be able to see like the child's expression, their face being covered on the schoolyard in the classroom, the teacher's wearing a mask. Like that's just not ideal either. It's like, I don't think Zoom was ideal. I don't think the mask in the classroom is ideal. I mean, for me, and I think for a lot of humans, we want social interaction. We want tribe, we want culture. We want people. Like, we're not meant to be isolated.
No.
It's like the lone wolf starves, we're not meant to be lone wolves. And the lone wolf joins a pack or dies. It's like we're meant to be part of a pack and a tribe. And I think that's innate in us as humans. And it hurt. It didn't just hurt the children. It hurt all of us, right? I mean, for me, it was drastic too. I mean, COVID had a huge impact on psychology for me because I started doing everything on Zoom. I didn't get to see children in person. And then with Zen Arts, with my company, entertainment was shut down. So we weren't doing anything. And things are still taking time to kind of ramp back up, but it's been kind of drastic across the board. I think we're going to see this for a while. Like the fallout from this COVID is going to affect children, especially for a long time. It's like, imagine being in preschool or kindergarten or even college, right? Imagine I think for me, my college experience is so beneficial, right? For me, as being a man, becoming a man, learning, I think for me, like, there wasn't anything more beneficial, educationally than being like in university and being around other kids that were, coming of age. I couldn't imagine doing that online. Like if I just wouldn't do that. Like, would you go to Stanford or Harvard or USC or UCLA online? Like, you want to be in college. You know?
I understand exactly what you're saying, but I couldn't imagine being in that specific situation. Like, luckily we were developed when this happened, right? But I think the worst case scenario, I was having a conversation with someone about it a couple months ago when like the pandemic and everything was going down. And I was like, I think the worst case scenario would be if I was like a senior in high school and I would lose my first year as a senior in high school and then lose, potentially part of my first year in college, right? And so you're losing 2 of the most developmental years of your life where you're having to be at home on Zoom and you lose all your interactions with other people. And you're right. I can't I can't even imagine what the repercussions are going to be emotionally and how people are going to be affected by missing out on those things such as prom and big events or your freshman year of college. It must have been devastating.
Yeah. I mean, if I had a child who was in college, I probably just wouldn't, I would have skipped those years, whatever was going on during COVID. I mean, like if my child got into Stanford or Cal State Northridge, whatever school it is,
Yeah.
I don't think I just wouldn't pay for it, and I just wouldn't encourage it. And I think it's so important those years.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, we're gonna put this on pause. Like we're just not gonna. You're not gonna do your first year of university online.
Yeah.
You're gonna do this when school opens.
Yeah.
And also, I think all of us would do it differently, right? I think I'm sure you or me, anyone we talk to, if this thing happened again, I think we probably handle it in a different fashion across the board.
Yeah. But you're actually the first person I've ever heard suggest even that option, which would be just to pause and just go do something else for a couple years until this passes over and then continue forward with life. I think some people also understand that, right? We have time. You can do things the right way. It doesn't all have to be rushed, but I don't think everybody also sees it from that point of view. The parents are like, no, I just want the kid to be done with college so I don't have to keep paying for it. They're not going to want them to sit around and do nothing for a year. And it's like, what would even be the option for that kid? It's going to be hard to find a job like with no education, right? There's a lot of cascading problems, but I think your solution would be the right solution, which is just, the whole world's shut down. It's all on pause. Let's just wait, and then you can start back up again in a year or two when this gets back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty good experience during COVID, and the people I was around, there was a lot of social time. We spent a lot of time together. A couple of my friends had kids, different ages, where they just spent more time with their kids, right? And then they teamed up with maybe another family or two, and maybe they traveled a little bit to different parks and places they could go to, nearby. But like I found like my group of friends spent a lot more time together. Like we kind of hunkered down and kind of, quarantined together, in places like I was in Tahoe for a short time. I was in Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
I was in Miami. And
Places with a little space.
yeah, I mean, well, and with friends, like I was with close friends. So we spent a lot of good time together. And so it didn't affect me socially. Really the only negative thing for me, for the most part, was just not being able to see children and then not being able to create art and entertainment, because that was kind of all on pause.
Yeah.
But I had a great time. I had a great time. I was in great places, and I was at the beach in Miami for a year, living right on the beach, and I got a dog and a golf cart on the beach, and was hanging out, and it wasn't. I got a girlfriend at the time, so it wasn't negative for me in those aspects. But I don't see a lot of people didn't have that same experience.
No, I don't think they did at all. And so, I mean, but obviously life is what you make it. If you don't make an opportunity or see something as an opportunity, then it can for sure crush you. Okay. And so I guess, is there any other like major problem that you see other than this education issue that's something just regular, that's something that a lot of kids deal with on a regular basis?
I mean, there's a lot of anxiety too. I think like I said, like the fallout even academically and whatever happened at home during COVID, there's been depression, anxiety, different social and emotional impact on families and on both ends, the child side and the parent side. Parents have been very stressed financially. Things have been difficult, or maybe relationships have split up. But kids are under more stress. There's more anxiety and there's more withdrawal and depression, I think, than what I've seen before. I mean, imagine if you're in second grade or even going into university, and you're just not cutting it, or this whole COVID thing. There was this massive gap, the amount of stress and anxiety that can create, which then creates physical problems. I mean, we still have children that don't want to come to school. They had so much time off. I mean, I don't think I've seen this many attendance problems either. Like, I mean, I'm dealing with kids every day who have been absent for 20, 30 days out of the school year, which is like pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so kids are more quick to stay home. There are more physical complaints. I mean, people are utilizing some of this behavior they learned during COVID. It's been really difficult in a lot of ways.
Understood. Yeah. And do you feel that a lot of times with these kids, just having a person to speak to about their problems is helping them resolve a lot of these issues?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like when we're dealing with depression or suicidal ideation, especially, it's it lowers the risk, for suicide when just in talking about it.
Yeah.
So I think, and understanding that too. I mean, not all therapists are good. but generally people get there
That's
themselves.
fair. Just like not all lawyers are good.
Yeah. But people tend to do the work themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I've even seen bad therapists do good work, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
because the client or the counselee is doing the work, right? It may take longer to get there, but I think, when we start addressing our own problems and recognizing them and talking about them and doing the work, then we start solving problems and we start resolving things with ourselves.
Got it. And you talked about suicidal thoughts for a moment. Do you feel that a lot of children are, I mean, when I was younger, I definitely can reflect that I probably had those thoughts a couple times in my life. When you do have a child like that, what are some of the things that you'll help guide them along the road to try to get them better?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with a lot of suicidal children. I mean, I always have. I mean, of course, like when a child's suicidal, the first person on campus they're going to come to is me, most likely.
Yeah.
I mean, we do a risk assessment. There's like more of a formal process of assessing because it's not uncommon to have suicidal thoughts, right?
Yeah.
It's different when you have a plan,
Yeah.
right? So if you have a plan to commit suicide, it's different than having the thought of suicide. So there has to be an assessment of some kind of like how much risk is this child at or person for committing suicide? Like, are they just thinking about it? Do they have a dream about it, or do they have a plan? Do they have access to a weapon? Do they have access to a gun at home? Have they thought out a plan? Is it detailed enough? And so it goes higher on the scale of risk, and how severe the plan or thoughts may be. So there's different intervention for that, right? I mean, it just might be talking to them if it's not high risk. And if it's high risk where there's a plan or there's a gun at home, well, then it could require hospitalization or more clinical treatment too.
Wow. Okay. I didn't. I mean, that's a great deciphering like kind of like statistic. It's like, is it just suicidal thoughts or is there a plan? And if people have a plan, it typically means that there needs to be a little bit more intervention on your end, and it can require anything from trying to help them talk about it, but mostly it could even require hospitalization. And so when something is that severe, like, do you guys get the parents involved? What happens with the parents typically in those types of situations?
Yeah, the parents are involved. Like, yeah, we contact the parents immediately, and there might be either police involved or the fire department involved, hospital. And so if a child's hospitalized, it could be for 72 hours or longer, depending on how high risk they are. And then when that child's released and when they come back to school, then we have a kind of a safety plan, or a reintegration plan of like the kid doesn't just go to the hospital, they come back to school. Usually there's a plan in place of like what supports are we putting in place, and the parents are part of that conversation the entire time. So it's different. Like when it's abuse, it's like that's investigated,
Yeah.
and the parents, like we don't call the parents, when there's like child abuse, we report it.
Yeah.
But when it's suicidal ideation, we involve the parents immediately, and we give the parents supports and recommendations, and we want to, we tighten the circle of care around the kid. So that might include outside therapy or counseling. It might include parenting. It might include behavior modification. I mean, it might include the teacher. But yeah, I think, when it's suicidal and it's serious, and there's a whole team of people, including the school and parents, that get involved.
Understood. Okay. And I guess I had two more questions before I kind of want to segue towards Zen Arts. But one question would be for any parents that are listening and that are paying attention to this podcast, what are some things that they could be looking for when it comes to their children, just maybe knowing that they might need counseling, or maybe even dealing with suicidal thoughts and things that maybe they know that they now need to get them in the hands of a professional like you? What are things that they should be seeing or looking for on a regular basis?
I mean, I think, what I see with parents more than anything is like a hesitation to just be honest, or have these conversations. I think it's like, it's okay to talk to your children honestly and openly about all of these topics, whether it's, suicidal ideation, anxiety, thoughts of sadness or withdrawal or academic struggles. I think parents need to be aware that it's okay to have open conversation and to have these conversations on any level, and then also to utilize the supports that are available, right? I think it's like sometimes the parents need to take themselves out of the equation because sometimes there's such an emotional connection, emotional reaction, where maybe like if it's doing math homework, for example, it's like, well, maybe mom and the child, they're fighting over the math homework. And so it becomes difficult for mom to help the child doing math. Maybe it's better to have a tutor do the math and take yourself out of the equation so there's not this emotional connection. And that could be the same, for things like depression or anxiety or ADHD. And then I think there are a lot of resources available that parents just aren't aware of. Like people like me. I think there are probably many parents that don't even know that there's a psychologist at their child's school. and they're not even utilizing those resources or even picking up the phone or scheduling a meeting to talk about this or their health insurance. There's a lot of parents that have access to mental health through their health insurance. They don't even know that. They're not even aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear you talking, right, and I imagine that I'm guessing that a lot of parents don't even have these conversations because they're not comfortable having these conversations with themselves, right? So being honest with your child and talking about these things is probably because they might have not done the work on themselves to be even to have these conversations in an open manner. And I obviously don't have children, but if I had children, I know that for me, I would want to speak to them almost like an adult in many ways, because sometimes I feel that with many people, whether it's children or just other individuals in general, even though people might not understand everything that you're saying, they can feel an emotion and they can feel the feeling of what you're trying to express. And sometimes that might be enough to help them get to where they need to go. And I don't know if you'd agree with that or disagree with that, being a psychologist.
Yeah, I think it's spot on.
Okay, cool. Then we're on page with that. Okay, so I guess one question before we move on is, what is one of the craziest things you've ever had to deal with being a clinical psychologist in your space, and how did you deal with it?
I think I used to work in South Central for years, and I worked at a high school. It was a pretty heavily gang-oriented, pretty tough neighborhood. There was a kid who was 16 at this high school that I was a psychologist at, who committed suicide. But he committed suicide by 911. So like he called 911. He was at a 7-Eleven and said, "There's a kid with a gun. You know, I'm scared for my life. Whatever." Right. So then the police showed up at the 7-Eleven. The kid had a fake gun, and he pulled it out, and they shot him and killed him. And so he basically called 911 to commit suicide.
Wow.
And I've never seen anything like that before. I mean, I've seen a lot of crazy, tough stuff, and that was a difficult one. So I mean, what we did in that situation was a lot of crisis counseling. You know, a lot of like just navigating through the school, the community, the families, friends that knew this kid. But yeah, that's one example of something tough.
That's wild. When you say that, I know there's a movie that I've seen where they did that same exact thing, where
Wow.
it was something where I remember like the guy wanted to get insurance money for his family or something, right? And he couldn't kill himself. And like he literally had to get the police to kill him so that they could get the money. But like, it's just like, it's interesting because the reason I bring it up is because like, I'm sure that kid saw it somewhere. He didn't come up with that idea on his own. So it's just so interesting, the media, and you become, I think, a lot of times what you digest, right? And digest means, what do you listen to? What do you see? What are you watching on a regular basis? And that can have a huge influence on who you become as an individual. So obviously sending out prayers and love to that family. I couldn't imagine what they were going through there, but it's just wild that a 16-year-old thought, I don't have the bravery to kill myself. I'm going to literally trick the police into killing me. That's some pretty high level stuff for a kid to be thinking of. And I'm wondering where he got those ideas from. And it's yeah, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. And for anybody who's listening, obviously, like when dealing with children or dealing with difficult situations, a lot of times just holding space for that child or just holding space for the individual that needs help, that's many times will help them get through that difficult time. Obviously, if you need help with a medical professional, you should reach out to one and get those tools and get the assistance that you need to get better. But with that being said, I do want to segue to Zen Arts. So I want to talk about Zen Arts. So Zen Arts, you've been doing it for 15 years now, right? And you, even for a period of time when you were younger, you were a professional musician. You played saxophone. You were a bass guitarist. You were in a rock band. What was that like? Was that fun? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I mean, I love music. I mean, music's a huge part of my life now. You know, I create a lot of music and I book a lot of musical talent. I think, you know, for me, I could pick up a horn and play as a professional. I could pick up a tool and fire dance as a professional. I think for me, it's not about the medium, you know. It's like, for me, it's like I want to create art, you know. And so
Yeah.
I love music, but I think like as I became older, you know, like out of high school, it was like, okay, am I going to go on to college and study music? Am I going to go to Juilliard and do music? Am I going to be a musician for the rest of my life? And that didn't make sense to me. It just didn't line up for me, and it just wasn't the life I wanted to live. So I left music, right? I studied philosophy, psychology, became a psychologist, and then I started fire dancing, not to perform, just as a hobby.
Yeah.
And I got really good at that, and so people started asking me to perform, and then I started performing. And then very quickly I got engulfed in like the circus world and the Burning Man world and the festival circuit. And I don't know, for me, it was like I had this vision of like, wow, I could create something, that was more runway driven, fashion driven, like Vogue, Vanity Fair, that included elements of circus, but also included music and fashion,
Yeah.
and was a little more polished and runway ready. And that hadn't really been done, from what I saw. And so that's kind of what sparked, the creation of Zen Arts. But I think for me, it was like really clear, like, I don't need to be on stage, for me, I want to create the stage. I want to create the whole show. I want to direct things. I want to produce things.
Yeah.
I want to do all of it. I want to do the music. I want to do the costumes. I want to do the choreography. I want to, I want to create, and all these aspects, for me, it's more fun for that. And I think as when I was younger, I didn't want to be an artist. Like, I didn't want to like live my life as an artist. And now I do want to be an artist. I am an artist, and I appreciate being an artist, and I have a lot of fun doing it. But I've also found my niche and what makes sense for me.
Got it. And so when you started getting these gigs, right? Was it just like people were hiring you personally, and then you were like, I know a couple of people, I can bring a couple of people in? Like, when did that transition go from you maybe getting hired to do some small stuff here and there to like, oh wait, I can actually create an experience for you, and then you were able to almost birth Zen Arts through that process?
I mean, it happened pretty quickly. I mean, I started getting hired for a couple of gigs, and then it was like, oh, I need to bring on other performers, right? So like very quickly as a fire dancer, it was like, well, no, they want 2 or 3 fire dancers. So I started actually hiring my teachers initially. Like, so I was learning from a couple different people, and actually like formally studying fire dancing, and I started hiring them very quickly. And so when I started hiring them, it was, now I'm putting together a show, right? Now it's like 3 dancers, 4 dancers, and then for me, it was like, oh, I could just do all of it, right? Like, and then when you start creating shows, now it's like what's the music for the show? What's the choreography for the show?
Yeah.
And like now it's like, oh, I don't want to just do fire. I want to do acrobatics and aerial flying and rigging and lighting and sound and dance and choreography and fashion and create the costumes. And for me, it kind of all happened overnight, practically. I mean, from the time I started getting paid to fire dance, it was probably less than a year before I birthed Zen Arts, and that took off overnight.
Got it. And you didn't really see anything as a limitation. You were just like, I really want to be able to bring all of this together. And so I guess on your end, like, when did you realize that you had this passion for, like, let's say the fashion and for the music and for the choreography and everything? Because it doesn't sound like it just like, well, it does sound like it happened all at once. But I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, you went from fire spinning, but did you always know that you had an interest in these costumes? Did you have an interest in the music? Did you have an interest in all these other things too? And how did that process happen?
I mean, I've always been interested in fashion and music, for example, but I've never really wanted to create fashion necessarily. I just like being fashionable.
Yeah.
But I think once I started like creating art in a circus fashion and going to like Burning Man, for example, and being inspired by all of the art, at that festival, and all the performers, the physical art, like the actual, like, sculptured art and the performance art, it really inspired me. And I think that was like what really did it. I think when I went to Burning Man for the first time, I had just kind of started fire dancing, but I wasn't performing. And I can remember saying to myself, wow, I want to perform like at Burning Man, like I want to do, and I did that the following year.
Yeah.
And I think that was one big inspiration, was like, hey,
Do
like,
you mean like you performed at the actual burn, like in the fire circle?
yeah, I did that. They call it the fire conclave. I did that.
Yeah.
I've done that several times, but then I also just perform at different camps.
Yeah.
And throughout Burning Man. But yeah, I performed in the circle with the man.
Nice. What does it take to perform in a fire conclave? And like, how much practice do you have to do? Is it like choreography for a year, or what does that look like?
You have to submit, and it's like an audition. So you have to. It's not solo. For example, it's like you have a troupe of fire dancers. You either create that troupe or you join a troupe, and then there's a submission video. You have to create choreography, and then you have to submit that to Burning Man, and then they approve you or don't approve you. And then if you've been doing it for years, then you kind of get grandfathered in, in a sense. But yeah, everyone around the man that's spinning fire is auditioned for that in a sense and submitted for that.
How cool. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know that I spin fire just amateurly, but something like that would require like time and dedication. Were you like meeting on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis to practice, or how does that all go?
Yeah, like I've got a couple of friends that have troops that are rehearsing right now, and Burning Man's in August. Now we're in May, so they're rehearsing probably once or twice a week. For different, and some of them are going to other festivals too. But Yeah, it requires a certain amount of rehearsals. So you'd have to be rehearsing with this particular troupe, wherever you are, weekly. Not for a year, but it could just be a couple months, or it could be several months.
Yeah, just whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, understood. And then would you say that Burning Man has a huge influence on your business, and did it inspire you a lot with your fashion, or just in terms of giving you ideas for your business?
Yeah, I mean, Burning Man's been a massive inspiration for me. I mean, I can't think of anywhere in the world where there's as much art and as much inspiration artistically as Burning Man. I mean, performance-wise and actual created sculptured art, for example. I think it's just a magical place, and I don't know that people that haven't been there understand what Burning Man is. It's like people that haven't been there might think it's a big party or it's a just drug-infested festival, but it's I've been to Burning Man maybe 12, 13 times. I've always camped somewhere different. I've gone with children. I've camped in Kidsville with babies. I've participated in different camps. I've created shows. Like Zen Arts has done massive scaled shows there, like stadium style shows. I've performed individually. It's pretty magical. I've done Burning Man sober. I mean, it's not a place you have to be on drugs. It's not just a party. I mean, for me, it's an art festival more than anything. I mean, Burning Man's I love the music there too, but for me, it's the art that really draws me, and it's a massive inspiration. Now, do I need to go to Burning Man every year? No. I mean, I'm very inspired by Burning Man, but my life is kind of Burning Man. I collaborate with a lot of artists that create art at Burning Man. I mean, I perform there many times, but I have a show tonight, where there'll be fire dancers and aerialists and acrobats, and I'm doing this all the time, so it's kind of like I've created a life that is that kind of, and that ethos kind of permeates, I think, throughout my own company too, is like this just kind of and a lot of my friends, right? I think, after you've been to Burning Man a few times, it's kind of like this sense of community that's different than I think what people have that haven't gone, and I think people start to communicate differently and socialize differently. But yeah, it's been a massive inspiration for me. I don't even think my company would exist if I didn't go to Burning Man.
That's fair. I mean, a lot of people ask me the same thing, like, what is Burning Man? And I remember hearing a quote once that trying to describe Burning Man is like trying to describe color to a blind person. It's just like, it's anything and everything you could ever imagine. It's an art festival. It's where people go and perform. Everything from fire performers to people that are going. I mean, if you want to go and you want to just party the whole time you're there, you can do that. If you want to go and you want to go do conscious stuff the entire time, you can do that. They have everything from yoga parties to cacao ceremonies to things
naked sex parties.
Like naked sex parties. It's really just anything that you could possibly imagine. And there's really no rules. I mean, obviously there's laws that apply just like normal laws, but in the sense that people can wear what they want, do what they want. You can climb what you want, and no one's telling you no. And yeah, definitely going and seeing the fashion there is very inspirational. And every single year, so I've been about 7 times myself, and every single year I go, I'm just always awe-inspired by the creativity of individuals and the wide range of fashion. And of course, you have the people that are dressed normal, and then you have people that are wearing the most elaborate costumes that you've seen them. They probably took almost an entire year to just create these outfits just to wear for one day and get it covered in dust. It's really inspirational, and I've seen some of your shows at Burning Man. They've all been fantastic, and I know you do a wide range of events, from small musical things to huge, almost Cirque du Soleil type of events. What is the biggest event that you have done at Burning Man?
We did a show, I think it was 2015, where I collaborated with another gentleman named Yarrow, who is a builder, amazing artist and builder.
Yeah, he builds the snails. Snail art cars.
Well, he did the ladybugs.
Yeah, the ladybugs. Sorry, not the snails. The ladybugs. I apologize. Yeah.
He built Robot Heart.
Oh, I didn't know that he built Robot Heart. How interesting. Very cool guy. I know he's based out of Miami. He had a warehouse. Yeah, had a warehouse over there. One of my friends, he lived at the warehouse with him and was helping him design it and work on a bunch of his stuff. Very creative individual.
Yeah, so this year, this particular year, I wanted to do a show at Burning Man, right? So I was going to build my entire show, and we started diving into what it would take, right? And I kind of realized quickly it was I want to bring the circus, but I don't want to build the stage, right? I don't want to build the circus.
Yeah.
And so it was actually probably early summer, June. A client flew me out to the Catskills in north of New York. And
what's that? Where is that?
Catskills is near Woodstock, so it's upstate New York, and it's just several hours from New York City. A friend of mine had a property there on a waterfall and like a creek or river, and he's a guy from New York City, and he was creating an event on his property, and so he flew me out there because he wanted to have performers in the woods, off the waterfall, like wanted to create all this whole crazy entertainment experience. And Yarrow actually had been his property building, and like building a barn and other things and some art pieces, and I didn't know him prior, so I met him. And we kind of hit it off. And he actually showed me a design for a Coliseum that he had for Burning Man. Like he actually had 3D drawings, CAD drawings, an actual model. And we called it Circus Maximus. And
That's
it was
rad.
literally a massive Coliseum, like this outdoor Coliseum with flags around it and seating around it. And some of the seating was like chains and hammocks. And it was like a very big architectural design.
Yeah.
But he had the stage, but he didn't have the circus. And so it kind of made sense. We're like, well, wait a second. Like, I have the circus. I don't want to build a stage. You have a stage. You don't have a circus. So,
Wait, so you're doing that this year?
no, this was in 2015.
Got it. Okay, understood.
Yeah. And so we started collaborating immediately, right? And this is June, and Burning Man's in August. So Yarrow, and so we came up with this together, and actually Yarrow helped us raise some money. Like, he got us about $70,000 or $80,000 that year for us to bring the circus, and we brought I think 30 some performers.
Wow.
Well, and then also, so he built the Coliseum, and then the centerpiece it was called Anastasia, which was a tripod.
Anastasia.
It was a tripod mosaic sculptured piece that had 3 points off of it, right? And we had a disco ball in the center. And so we off those 3 points, we put motors and we hung aerialists from these 3 points. And that year there was an art piece on the playa called Cherish, and it was cherry blossoms, and there were these massive sculptured mosaic pieces that were I don't know, maybe 50, 60 feet to 100 feet high that kind of sprouted from the playa, and there were these massive cherry blossoms with like flowers on them.
Yeah.
It was probably one of my favorite art pieces that I've ever seen at Burning Man. And I remember stopping at that piece. Like, I had a break. We were really busy that whole week because we were rehearsing for these shows. We did the show 3 times that week. But I was at this piece, and the artist, his name is Rob Bushholtz. Rob was there was an art tour happening, and Rob was at the Cherish piece, the Blossoms, talking about the art piece. And I introduced myself to him, and immediately we hit it off too. And I was so impressed by his art. I just wanted to be friends with him, right? Well, it just so happens later that he built the piece we were hanging off of, the Anastasia piece that was the mosaic centerpiece that was part of our show. And we've been best friends, me, him, and Yarrow, ever since.
That's amazing.
But that show, we had about 30 some performers. We did a lot of acrobatics, choreography, dance, music. Andrew Jones. It was an amazing graphic artist, digital artist. He created all the digital media for the show.
How rad.
We had projection screens. We had a Tesla coil as part of the show.
Wow.
It was like a whole thematic show, and so after the man burned, we performed this show, and I want to say there must have been 50,000 people at the show. It was a massive undertaking.
That's wild. I'm really bummed because I was there that year. I totally missed this. I didn't even know that this existed. But I mean, that a lot of people also don't understand the grand scale of Burning Man. When you arrive, I think it's something like 10 square miles is like the event. Like it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Just visiting one of your friends will take you an hour riding a bike to get to their location. And so it's just a testament to that there was a $50,000
Still lost money because most of the performers that I brought were from Cirque du Soleil, had performed with artists like Madonna or Beyonce, big artists at the time, and they hadn't been to Burning Man, right? So
they were just
and they weren't getting
excited to
paid, they weren't getting paid, but we had to get tickets, we had to secure a camp, RVs, food, I mean, all the costs to get everybody there. For all these artists still adds up, right? But no one made a dime. If anything, we spent more money, but we raised a considerable amount of money, so we didn't have to I didn't come out of pocket that much. But yeah, but it was so. But it was nice because
it's a passion project.
Yeah, and it's that's where it started for me, right? So it was it was very emotional and very beneficial for me to be able to come back to Burning Man and contribute and perform and create all of this, like, where, you know, it taken me years to build. It was very
Yeah, I
fun.
mean, for those of you that don't understand, right? Like when you go to Coachella or when you go to like Ultra, the stages and all the performers and everything there is part of like you pay for the ticket and it comes like Coachella will build those stages. Ultra builds those stages. They put together everything. When people are like, "Well, what's going to be at Burning Man this year?" We have no idea. It's Burning Man is brought and built by the people that are going to Burning Man. So if Doug and his team feel inspired and they have to like apply. They reach out to Burning Man. They need to get a designated space. They then build their project. They have to submit plans. And all of that comes out of the pockets of Doug and his team. And so people a lot of times ask, like when I stay at a camp, because I've stayed at, I think, 4 or 5 different camps myself, people are like, well, what are you bringing this year? Well, every year it's different. Sometimes a camp will build a stage. Sometimes a camp will do performances. Sometimes a camp will be just a camp of fire performers and they will do fire shows throughout it. And it's really just the people that are going and what they're willing to contribute and give back to the community, and no one gets paid for it. And when you see, for example, like a DJ, like let's say, just use a big name like Diplo, or you see somebody like Skrillex, or you'll see a big DJ like that, you're like wondering, well, are they getting paid? Well, they shouldn't be, because no one's getting paid to perform at Burning Man. People are supposed to be coming and just giving back to the community. And so it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. And I know too, because I've helped run a couple different camps, like the dues for some of our camps. So you said like you guys collected 70, 80,000 for yours. Like the dues that we've collected for some of the camps that I've run have been over $300,000. And that helps to build infrastructure, because you're essentially building a little city within a city. And that's everything from power to water to getting all the RVs pumped and dumped. And you're literally basically creating this little ecosystem within a larger ecosystem. And so a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money goes into it. And that's also what makes it so special, is people are just doing things for the sake of creating art, for bringing something to share with others. And that's what makes it so special. It's definitely a magical place. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Burning Man has there's some small grants, you know, for artists that are creating art.
Yeah.
At Burning Man, it's probably not enough to fund the art projects, you know, but there are some grants. There's some donors, right? I mean, everyone's just got to kind of put together, you know, their projects on their own for the most part in whatever capacity they can.
Yeah.
But yeah, these big camps and big projects, you know, can be very costly. You know, I mean, there's people putting millions of dollars into projects and art cars and Burning Man camps, but that's what makes it so inspirational too, is that it's all fresh and new and different, you know, and there's like some of the best artists in the world and some of the best minds in the world are contributing to these projects.
100%. I've met some interesting individuals at Burning Man. I met the person who started The Simpsons. He was the original creator of it. I met somebody who owned Orbits.com. I met Robert Patterson. I've met Usher. Like, it's a wide range of individuals that go to Burning Man, and everybody there is treated the same. There's no bottle service. There's no VIP area. There's no backstage. Everybody is treated equal. I've never really been to a place like it before. Like, if you see somebody that inspires you, or you want to meet somebody, you just walk up to them and you go talk to them. There's no degree of separation. And it's like this unspoken thing that everybody's put in so much work to get here, that everyone's just on this equal playing field. And they're all there to help each other, inspire each other, and to just experience life however they want to, doing whatever they want, saying whatever they want, acting however they want, and dressing however they want. It's a very, very unique place. And a lot of people are always like, why do you go back every year? I'm like, until you show me someplace that's more unique than this, I'm going to keep going back until I find something better. But it's really, really special event for sure. Yeah. So to kind of segue back, so Burning Man obviously inspired Zen Arts and Zen Arts now. Like, when I hear you say, like, you have these wide range of performers, like, when you first started your business, do people just, like, reach out to you because they know who you are, or do you put out ads? Like, how have you gotten your repertoire? So 2 questions. How many people do you think you have access to when it comes to performers on a regular basis? And how did you find those individuals?
I mean, initially, I kind of had to do that reach out myself, you know, and I had to sort of like contact artists and kind of get buy-in for my vision, you know, what I was creating. I mean, now I have enough of a reputation that I get a lot of artists coming to me, or other artists referring other artists. I can even put out casting calls, you know, for some shows, and we'll have auditions of hundreds of performers.
Yeah.
And I probably hire about 200 to 300 performers a year.
Yeah.
Not all, you know, exclusively, but like, you know, to every project's got something different involved. So yeah, I mean, now it's like, and also I have different there are different avenues, right? Like I've got different contacts and different ways to reach out to different talent. But yeah, we advertise sometimes. It might be an audition, or different agents might refer, talent, or talent, might submit directly to us. But we get submissions every day from different talent, video submissions, resumes, casting calls. But yeah, it's definitely much easier to find the talent now than it was when I first started.
Yeah.
And to get the buy-in,
Can you give us like just like a tidbit of like what the variety of different performers and people that you work with, like just to give us like a small scale so we could understand?
Yeah, I mean, so I do a lot of music, right? It could be anything from, like, right now I'm putting together a show. It's jazz, more big band jazz oriented. But I've done, rock music. I've done, pop music. I've done classical music and jazz, or music like specific instrumentalists. Like it might even just be an instrumentalist with a DJ, like a drummer or a trumpet player, or a sax player. So I do a lot of music. Like I'm doing a chamber orchestra, as well right now. And then there's all the different.
Orchestra means like just a wide variety of like
Mostly strings. Like I'm doing an event in Aspen next month where it's going to be mostly string players playing like in a like more of a formal orchestral fashion.
Okay.
But then like we do a lot of dance, right? So we choreograph everything from break dancing to hip hop to modern dance, heels, like all of that, burlesque. So there's a lot of dance in different fashions, with some of the best dancers in the world. I think Los Angeles probably has the best dancers, like worldwide. There's just no city like Los Angeles. I don't think New York even can compare to Los Angeles in the world of dance. Fire, acrobatics, aerial rigging and flying, a lot of different ground acrobatics from contortionists to different hand-to-hand things, jugglers, stilt walkers, character performers. Synchronized swimmers. So we do a lot of stuff in the water too, in the air, on land. And then also right now I've been doing, probably since COVID, it's been more focused on, I'm doing more wellness events.
Yeah.
I'm doing more wellness oriented things. So like, for instance, there's a festival coming up called Lightning in a Bottle.
Yeah.
Which is a big festival by the Do
I'll
Lab.
be there. I'll see you there.
Yeah, so I'm helping produce the VIP glamping camp there called Atlas Wild.
Yeah.
And so we have a huge tented area there in that VIP camp, and I'm producing like all the wellness every day from like 8 to noon before the real music starts. So we're doing breath work and sound healing and qigong, and yoga, a lot of different like modalities and different practitioners I'm bringing in from around the world. So we'll be doing, and I've been doing more of that in the last couple of years, and I'm enjoying that. Like working with like real sound healers, like people that are using musical instruments and voice in different languages and instruments from around the world, and from Brazil to Africa, and utilizing different sound therapy and breath work, for example, and qigong and yoga. And so for me, it's been really nice to do some of that, because I'm still creating art and creating an experience that's interactive, that's more wellness oriented and driven more toward like health, mind, and body. And that's been really exciting for me.
When I hear all this, I'm not gonna lie, the way that I feel is jealous. Like you must meet some of the most interesting people. You obviously, and it's not only that, but like you are not just witnessing and watching the coolest shit and people doing the coolest shit, you're literally creating it. And so it must be this feeling of awe, magic, like inspiration. Like you get to see the greatest performers, for lack of a better term, in the world doing what they do best. And then not only that, but also just receiving the gratitude and love and just like I'm sure the appreciation from people for helping to orchestrate and to put this together. And I don't know if everything I'm saying sounds right, but it's definitely inspiring that you literally like created a business out of nothing from something that you just loved to do. And if this is not the greatest testament to what do you want out of life and why, like literally you followed the calling, like for lack of a term, you just listen to your heart and you're like, I want to do this. And the reason why I want to do this is because it inspires me. It makes me feel good. And you've literally done that with your life. It's very inspiring.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I mean, it's like there's a, within the company, there's a family, vibe. Like there's a real nice interaction and connection with the artists I work with, and there's a certain amount of respect between me and the artists that I work with, and that's really nice because, like I said, at Burning Man, that time when I met this artist Rob, talking about his art piece, and now we're like, best friends,
Yeah.
and we've created some things together since then. I really appreciate that kind of relationship because
Yeah.
for me, art is so important. I mean, I collect art, I'm producing art, I'm an artist too, and so it's like I really appreciate that relationship.
Yeah.
And then of course, yeah, it's the clients that I work for. There's a certain level of respect too, and appreciation that's really beneficial too. But ultimately though, it's like one of the motivating factors for me to do this was I just wasn't happy with the art I was seeing at some of these parties and events.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, this could be better. This could be different, right?
Yeah.
Like I could do this differently. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to create my own parties, my own events.
Yeah.
Which is super satisfactory too. It's like, well, I get to like create what I want to experience. What
Yeah.
makes sense for me.
Yeah, and I mean, so Doug has he's helped me throw several of my birthday parties for the last couple of years, and I know that for me and my friends, and I'm not doing things on a very small scale, but I know that all my friends tell me every year that my party is the craziest party that they go through the year, and like at the last one, to give people an example, like he helped me with getting us set up with breath work in the beginning. Secondly, he got us help set up with a live, basically a band that they had everything from violin to keyboard to saxophone and a celloist. And then we had fire performers. And so it was really the wide gambit. And so the sky is the limit. And I'm doing things on a very, very small scale, right? And so I guess let me ask you a question of, when so you've obviously dealt with high level clientele before, and when you're dealing with high level clientele, like what is one of the craziest parties, or what is one of the biggest parties that you've ever thrown and you've ever had funded, and like what did that look like? Was it a couple $100,000 or like what did that look like?
No, I mean the big ones have been in the millions. I mean I've done parties for Gaga and some other big celebrities, for example, that have been even just 100 people that have been over $1 million.
Wild.
Or I just did a wedding recently. There was an Indian wedding in Florida that was probably about 5 million and 150 guests.
Wow.
Not 5 million for me, but overall.
Yeah,
I mean,
of
like
course,
for
for what the
example,
cost
like
of the party
this
was,
particular
yeah.
wedding, I think they spent over $1 million in flowers.
Yeah.
For example, but no, I mean, most of our budgets range from 10,000 to 500,000. So I'd say it costs a lot more than you might think to sort of put on these things. When you're talking about costume designs and sketches, CAD drawings to actual choreography and rehearsals and studios and flying performers around the world. And then some of these performers, they're such specialty acts, right? They're so unique that they can get thousands of dollars. Like I've got a couple of performers where they wouldn't work for me for less than $10,000 for a 5-minute performance.
Yeah.
So or I've done events where we're performing and John Legend is also performing. I think I've done 3 events where John Legend's performed at the event.
Wow.
And he's probably getting $1 million to play 5 or 6 songs. I mean, I've done some events with some of the biggest bands like Maroon 5. I've done an event where they played. I've done I've probably done 3 events where Nile Rodgers and his band have played. Like, so I've had an opportunity to be at some events that are pretty lavish and expensive.
How cool. Yeah. Who are some of the coolest people you've ever met?
I mean, Nile Rodgers for sure. Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
I did a party this last year for Halloween that the Rolling Stones was at. They played at the party.
Nice. I would say, like, what makes Mick Jagger so cool? Does he still have a lot of spunk, a lot of personality?
Yeah,
or
just
like
a lot of personality. Great
Yeah.
guy, nice, authentic, sincere.
Yeah.
Richard Branson. I've done a couple of events on Necker Island.
Oh, wow. Where he hired you, like his team hired you, or what happened there?
Whoever was throwing the events there, not him directly, but I've done a couple parties for Virgin back in the day with him, but Necker Island was, produced events like from small groups.
Yeah.
He's pretty awesome. Guy Libetaire, who created Cirque du Soleil.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a long list. I could keep going on and
No,
on.
of course. I mean, like, I guess I'm just like, once again, it's just like inspirational, right? Like you're literally doing what you love, and you're doing it because it's such a passion. And not only that, but you've had the opportunity to meet some of the most influential and amazing people on the planet, and you're now getting a chance and you're getting an opportunity to share your passion and your art with them, and it's resonating well, obviously, because you've been hired all over the planet, you've been taken on these amazing trips, and so I'm guessing at this point, like, do most people just come and find you organically?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I've got a lot of clients that are repeat clients, or
Yeah.
it's word of mouth for sure. But we also do a lot of marketing. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got, I'm on all the social media platforms, from LinkedIn to Instagram to TikTok.
Yeah.
And I've got a whole team of social media management, that helps manage all the social media platforms. But then
Yeah.
we also do Google advertising. We do take Google ads, we do SEO.
Yeah.
We take out magazine ads. We've done billboards in the past. I mean, we've done like a little bit of everything in the marketing world. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's never stops, right? It's like it's there's work coming in word of mouth, but like there's people I want to reach that don't know about me,
Yeah.
all over the globe. And so for me to do stuff worldwide and to get to more, people that don't know about me, there's a significant amount of marketing that has to happen.
So let's say just like in the US, right? Like, are there a lot of other companies like you? I know, are there people doing it on the scale that you're doing it, or just like, what does your main competition look like?
Not many. I mean, there's probably like two or three, like in the entire country, that are doing similar sorts of things. I mean, all three of these, like, they are a little different in different ways. But no, I don't think there's a lot of competition.
Do you know them personally, the competition?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And do you guys ever collaborate, or you guys more look at each other as competition?
Sometimes actually, there's been some times where I've called on some of the competition, and it's been receptive, and it's been beneficial. Other than that, I mean, some of the competition used to work for me.
Got it. And so they went and just started their own stuff
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
going on their own.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I mean, the thing is, like, competition or not, it's like I think there's enough work out there. So I don't think, like, I'm not intimidated by the competition, or I'm not I'm not worried about that, because I
Yeah.
think there's plenty of work out there.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
so,
I would just more see it as an opportunity. Like you said, it's like sometimes you might have a performer that they need, or they might have a performer that you need. I mean, I've always just seen it as kind of like you can even subcontract work to them and make a percentage of what you're providing to them.
yes.
So it's like collaborating is the best space. And I know for me too, like within my space, like I even created a networking group of personal injury attorneys. And people are like, why would you network with people that do the same thing that you do? I'm like, well, because I might be a specialist at one thing and they might be a specialist at another thing. And at the end of the day, it's about providing the best service possible. And the money will always come later on down the road as long as you're doing a good job. But yeah, I don't know. I see people in your space always as like more collaborators than competition. But I can also see how some people in my space also see me as a competition instead of a collaborator. So it's all about a mindset.
I mean, when I first started, it was really bad in the sense of, like, the competition was not happy about me being on the scene.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, because you're doing things differently than most people.
yeah, well, and I just started being successful very quickly. So
Yeah.
I started getting work very quickly. So, like, there's a couple of other companies that saw that as me taking work from them potentially. We may have even been bidding on the same gigs together. And,
Yeah.
and there were even companies at the time, two particular companies, that told artists that they wouldn't hire them if they worked for me, and kind of pinned the artists against both of us in different ways. That's changed now. I think it's come a long way. But initially,
Yeah.
there was a lot of, like, fear and intimidation from other companies that were just not happy about, who is this guy? Who is Doug? Why is he
Yeah.
on the scene, and how is he taking work from us?
Yeah, my feeling is that you probably came from a different position, right? Like a lot of people that I know that in your space are struggling artists. They don't make a good living, they don't have money, and they cannot just normally even support themselves in many ways. And so you're coming from educated, you have a degree, you have a normal salary job, and you're not coming from a place of scarcity. You're doing it from more of a place of passion and love and enjoyment of what you do. And if you don't get the bid, it's not going to kill you. But many times for those individuals, it might be the difference between them being able to put food on the table. And I might be also overstepping and not trying to say this in a derogatory manner, but this is just my observation. Does
Yeah.
it sound about right?
Yeah, well, I think the problem is that not all artists are good business, people. And
Yeah.
so I think, it's like, yes, I am an artist, and I think it takes an artist to do what I do.
Yeah.
But also, I'm a businessman, so I'm running a business, and there's a lot of aspects to running a business, from having a board, stocks, to accounting, CPA, to organizing, contracts. I mean, there's a lot to being an entrepreneur, like, and having an org chart and being a CEO. That not all artists are good at. And so I think, when I first came onto the scene, very quickly, I was able to do business well, and the art piece was already there. But a lot of the competition are artists. You know, they just don't know how to run a business.
That's fair. And that's a very specific skill set all in itself. And that's something that a lot of times I get brought in when there's like legal disputes, just helping people to understand that, yeah, they might be intelligent, they might have the knowledge, but they don't know how to run a business at all. And that's a whole different thing entirely. And I know with you, you went through some difficulties when you first started Zen Arts, right? You had a partner, and then when it came to the business, did things end up like go? I know now it's just you. Do you mind sharing what happened there? Is there some lessons that you learned from that? Because that's really what I want to get into. Like, what did you learn from that whole partnership, and what did it teach you?
Well, I mean, I definitely learned in a business sense that, you know, when you have partners, you know, or shareholders, you have a responsibility, right? And so I think, you know, when I initially started this, I didn't really want to run a business. It was a creative project, right? It was like it was my creative outlet. I already had a job, you know, as a psychologist. So this for me was more of a creative outlet. I didn't like, it wasn't a business thing for me. So, and I didn't understand, you know, initially like how a corporations run, right? I mean, now I feel like I could be the CEO of any corporation. Like I have a real good mindset of like how a corporation operates. But yeah, I started the company with someone I was dating. It was another fire dancer, and we were dating. We didn't date for long, but we started fire dancing together. And you know, I had this idea, and she was on board with the idea, and so I said, "Let's do this together." I think part of me at the time was probably too scared to do it alone.
Yeah.
I wanted support, I wanted help, so which I wouldn't do now. And
Yeah.
and so she came on board, and she had a talent for making costumes, and she was also a performer. And she took over, you know, a lot of responsibilities when we worked together. And but I think very quickly I realized that this wasn't my person, you know, this wasn't my partner, romantically or relationship wise. And so that relationship ended on that capacity. And I think from that moment on, she and I just didn't get along very well. And that kind of took a few years to boil, where we just had a hard time communicating. We were like the guitar player and the singer that didn't talk, right? We did different things for the company, so it wasn't even necessary all the time to even be together or in the same room. But she had a hard time with that. And I think she had a hard time with moving on with her life. And ultimately, I think, you know, she was following my vision. And I think she felt so attached she couldn't get out of this relationship. And so she filed a lawsuit and tried to take the company from me. And that didn't work out for her. And we probably battled it out for 2 years. And she lost. You know, she had a law firm that was a lawyer of someone I knew as well, who was working for free. And they kind of cornered me and pinned me into a position of like, you know, I didn't have enough money to even fight the lawsuit. So, you know, I basically like I was in Toronto, Niagara Falls, at a job for a few weeks. We were doing a theater show there in a casino, and I got on a plane to come back from Toronto, and I tried to buy a drink on the plane, and my credit card got denied, right?
No.
And then I tried to log into my email, and I'd been locked out of my email. It's like, what's going on? So I had a layover in Atlanta for an hour, and I got a message from my ex's lawyer saying, hey, like, she's suing you, and we're taking over the company. We'll talk when you land. And I'm like, I was totally blindsided. I didn't see anything. They've been planning this for a long time.
Yeah.
They moved the money out of the Zen Arts account. Like, they basically took all the money from the business account and put into a separate account that I didn't have access to. They changed the locks on the place that we had here in Santa Monica where all the costumes were done, and you know, basically like an office for us. They changed the locks in the office. They moved the money out of the bank account. And they knew I had no money because she was the one paying me, but she hadn't been paying me. So they had drained my bank account. So they knew I had no money, and they figured, you know, we'll just file a lawsuit. He won't even be able to lawyer up. He doesn't even have enough money to lawyer up.
Yeah.
Which was true, and actually I was devastated. And when the lawsuit was filed, I agreed to give her the company because I just didn't see. I talked to lawyers. I mean, everybody's like, you know, you're screwed. So I agreed to give her the company. I was like, you know, all right, you made this horrible move. You're going to steal my company from me, but okay, take it, right? So they drafted an agreement, a settlement agreement, and in the agreement was a non-compete. And the non-compete stated that I couldn't be an artist or I couldn't create art on pretty much every continent, like any kind of art.
Yeah.
So it was like, wait, you're going to take my company from me and you're going to tell me I can't be an artist? I can't go across the street and paint a painting?
Yeah.
So I couldn't sign that, right? And then I talked to a friend who was a lawyer who's like, oh, I got your back. And so we lawyered up, and they filed a lawsuit, and they filed a motion immediately to remove me as an officer and director. You know, making claims that were false, and they lost that motion. And then she resigned as an officer and director, and then I took over the company, and she kept on with this lawsuit with free lawyers for 2 years, depositions and discovery. I mean, her legal fees would have been probably $300,000 or $400,000. I mean, mine were a couple $100,000. I went back to being a psychologist because at the time I wasn't. So I got my job back as a psychologist. I borrowed money from friends. I mean, I dug up money wherever I could from whomever I could.
Yeah.
And then they filed a second lawsuit against the CPA for the company saying he was stealing money. It was the CPA she hired, which wasn't true. And I mean, all this went on for 2 years. But meanwhile, though, I took over the company, and the company actually did the best. It like blew up overnight. Like more successful. There were more gigs coming in. Like the company just like it did so well. And of course, she didn't make any money from that because we weren't distributing to shareholders. for whatever reason, thought by squeezing money and taking these
Yeah.
things, he didn't obviously think of like what could potentially happen if this thing didn't get resolved overnight.
Yeah, he
And they were
was-
overzealous with with putting this non-compete in the lawsuit. They were super overzealous because I was going to hand the whole company over to her.
Yeah.
But they just really wanted to squeeze me. I mean, honestly, I think their mission was like strip me of any value and money and put me on the street. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't know how you live with yourself or how you even operate as that sort of human.
Yeah, so just so you know, your attorney should have told you this, but if he didn't, non-competes are not really enforceable in the state of California. And I'm glad that you didn't know that, because if you did know that, maybe you would have just signed it anyways and given her the company and moved on and did your own thing. Non-competes have to be very specific. Like, let's say you work for a chiropractor and you work as an apprentice under this chiropractor. If he puts a non-compete and says you can't open a chiropractic office within 10 miles of me, like, that's reasonable. But most people...
No, this was very specific. Like,
Yeah.
it was actually an ironclad
Yeah.
non-compete. But the other thing is that what they would have done is they
Yeah.
just would have sued me again and again and
Yeah,
again.
but they
so like
would've-
I would have been wrapped up in lawsuits.
Got it.
And it didn't really matter. I mean, the non-compete was pretty laid out. Like, you can, if the non-compete's very specific, it can be enforceable. But
Yeah.
regardless, they just would have filed another lawsuit if I opened a new company. Now,
Yeah.
with that
They would
being
have just
said,
kept trying to crush you.
with that being said, is
Yeah.
that, you know, we discussed a non-compete for her when we settled, right, with
Yeah.
my attorneys. And I immediately didn't want to. I'm like, no, I don't want to put a non. I'm not going to do this to her. She can go do whatever she wants to do.
Yeah.
I don't care, and I'm not intimidated by her. And she did. She started a company the next day that she settled with me, and it flopped. It didn't do well. I mean, I think it lasted 6 months or something. But
Yeah.
it doesn't exist now, and this is like 6 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
But
Have
she
you guys,
tried.
Have you guys resolved and become friends at all?
Oh, I have
or-
not seen her since the lawsuit.
Got it. I mean, I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of reconciliation there unless it was active on both ends. Yeah, that's
I
tough.
don't think so. Yeah.
No, yeah, wild. And so I guess, okay, going through
It was
all
a
that-
business divorce, you know, that didn't end well.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for her.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, it wasn't a good process. I mean, the legal system sucks. You know, litigation's like,
Yeah,
I mean, you don't know
I
until
don't
you're in it.
disagree with you.
don't know until you're in it. And I mean, I feel like I learned a lot of lawyering, you know, through this process. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of discovery and depositions and things where it was like, wow, like I'd never really been involved in anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't understand the complexity of litigation, but also just the length that it takes, right? Like, I mean, I have one case right now. We're coming up on 6 years, and we have trial finally coming up next week, and people don't understand that discovery process itself. Like, I have clients yelling at me. They're like, it's been a year and a half. I'm like, these things can take easily a year and a half to 3 years. Like, it really just depends. I mean, from the date a lawsuit is filed, there's a law that says it needs to be brought to the court system within 5 years. So just so you understand, like, that's the max time limit that it could take. But it can take any amount of time in between, depending on the complexity of the case, how many people need to be deposed, how many issues there are. So yeah, this stuff can drag on and on and on, and it's not beneficial to the client. At least in my business, it's all on contingency. The client's not having to pay hourly for my work on a regular basis. So in your situation, though, the longer it drags on, means the more out of your pocket, and that can crush someone. If you don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars, you can't afford to put on a lawsuit for multiple years. It's crazy. Okay, I want to ask, what is the so obviously you do a wide range of parties. What is the craziest party you've ever thrown? I know you've thrown sex parties and you've thrown stuff along those lines. I just want to hear about some of the craziest stuff you've had to do.
I mean, I've done a couple things with celebrities I won't name, like pretty big celebrities. Like I did a bachelor party in Vegas for a celebrity, and there was probably 10 people there, and those 10 people are probably the biggest movie stars like in the world, like the biggest names you could think of.
Yeah.
And we didn't do sex per se. We didn't really do that per se, but we did like a lot of sexy entertainment, you know, a lot of different kind of wild, vibey, sexy shit, you know.
Like burlesque dancers.
No, more like, you know, girls walking around the house, you know, as cats with collars and eating caviar out of cat bowls and pouring milk on themselves,
Wow.
you know, that kind of thing. Or like, you know, taking yoni eggs out of their vaginas and putting them on the dinner plates, you know. I mean, different things that are kind of wild and more eccentric.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't imagine any of that stuff. Yeah, so I guess when it comes to that stuff, do you, I guess, what does the creative process look like for coming up with those ideas?
I mean, I tend to stay away from anything that's like very sex oriented, you know, like anything that's too erotic, just because I think whatever I create is already sexy.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to like appease a wide audience, like since I started, you know. We do a lot of corporate events too.
Yeah.
I can create erotic art, but it's not really my passion, because I think what I create is already sexy. The performers I work with are sexy. My vision and my own eye like sexy things, sexy fashion. But like naked people and sex, like, it's not really something that really motivates me.
Gotcha.
But the creative process, it varies. I mean, what I like to do is create with our clients, you know. So it's fun to get somebody involved in the process. So like if it's someone else's idea or vision, or I can come up with an idea that there's feedback, whether it's like sharing drawings or feedback on drawings or ideas. I mean, I have a whole team, you know, that I work with that have lots of great ideas too, whether it's me working with one of the choreographers that I hire or a designer or a musician, you know, it's all kind of customized in different ways depending on what the venue is, right? Is the venue an outdoor venue, you know, in Norway, you know, off of a cliff? Or is it in a theater, in a proper theater, or is it in someone's backyard? You know, it kind of depends on what the venue is and what the vision and what the theme may be.
Things even from like these bachelor parties, and you do even like corporate events, because I've seen you do stuff for like, you've done stuff for like Lamborghini and Ferrari before, right?
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
I mean, corporate shows tend to be a little bit more organized in a certain way, right? So like I've done shows for Paramount, you know, Pictures or Facebook or Google.
Yeah.
Like you said, Lamborghini, Porsche. I mean, it kind of just depends, you know, what the client, who the client is, right? Like, you know, I might do a job for Cisco or PayPal. It's going to be much more conservative, you know, and not at all, you know, provocative versus like Facebook. You know, we've done shows for Google and Facebook where they can be a little edgier, where it might be like us doing something with J-Lo, you know, or Christina Aguilera for Facebook. But PayPal is something that's like, you know, super conservative, you know, and very different. It just kind of depends.
Got it. So it's a wide range, a wide variety. And as you've worked through these events, you've obviously worked with the wide range of more of some of the most famous people on the planet. I've heard somebody say to me, like, the more famous someone is, the kinder and a better personality that they have. Is that something that you would agree with?
I mean, all the celebrities that I've worked with, everyone's at such a high level and on their game. Like everyone's been really, it's been really nice. You know, I mean, I've worked with a lot of different celebrities that are so good, like J-Lo, you know, or Lady Gaga or Madonna, that are just on top of their shit. And I think to be an artist now at the caliber, you know, of some of these like very famous people, it's not easy. You know, it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication. You know, it's not like, you know, this isn't a bunch of rock and roll and cocaine. You know, it's like people that are on the top of their game, whether it's a movie celebrity, an actor, or a musician. At least the ones I deal with work really hard and have a lot of compassion. But there's also a lot of trust already. So it's like when I come into working with somebody who's a big artist, there's already the door's already been open, right? So there's no vetting necessarily. It's like there's already a trust and a relationship there. And so it's kind of like, let's get to work and let's create something cool. You know?
Awesome. And so, like, speaking about these people that are on their game and they're at such a high level, let me ask you, because when I talk to you, I feel like you're very much so on your game, and you're at such a high level when it comes to your profession. What is like something that you would consider your superpower, or something, or a habit that you do on a regular basis that helps you stay on top of your game?
I mean, I work out a lot. So, I mean, and I eat really well. So I think for me, diet and physical health is super important. You know, I mean, I working out 4 to 5 days a week, and the workouts are pretty intense. And so I think that really helps me. You know, I think the ability to stay focused health wise. You know, I mean, I think everything I put in my body, you know, aside from drinking now and then, is you know, affects me in a good way that helps with my clarity and my focus. But yeah, I also think just my ability to communicate and have vision. You know, I kind of like. I mean, I'm sort of a king in a way. I kind of lean in the king house where I can kind of hold the kingdom together, and I've got vision and innovation, where like, you know, what like it benefits me to have the magicians around, you know, that can develop the plans. Like I'm not much of a, you know, cross, you know, and dot the I kind of person. I'm really more of like visionary. And so I think I'm really good at creating the vision and finding the right people that can execute the vision. That's been, I think, a skill of mine.
Awesome. Okay. If you could go back in time and give little Doug some advice when he was first starting out Zen Arts and creating all of this, what would you tell that kid?
Say, don't have a business partner.
Don't have a business partner.
You don't need a business partner.
Yeah. You know, it's a piece of advice that I actually give a lot of people when my friends come to me and they're like, hey, I need to create an organization, or I need to start my S Corp. I'm trying to start this company. And I tell people, I'm like, well, do you have any partners? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, can you do without them? And that's a very big question that I ask early on. I mean, I've seen families get ripped apart, best friends that never speak to each other again, relationships. And at the end of the day, my advice to people is like, you can have partners in ways that they're not actual like owner partners. Like they can be sweat equity partners, which means as long as they're doing the work that they promise that they're going to do, they'll own that percentage. But the moment that they stop, they lose it, and you can move on with your lives and continue forward. There's a lot of created options, and if you can go without having a partner, I give the same advice. I would recommend not having one at all.
Yep.
Cool.
Good advice.
All right, let me ask you one last question. So now that I've had you on here, who is the most interesting person that you know that you could connect me to so I could have him as a guest on this podcast?
Oh, I was just gonna say you, but
Well,
not you.
interview myself.
Not you, right? Wow, that's a good question. I've got a buddy of mine, Sean Antonio, who's a like a life coach, who is just an exceptional human being, who's like very, very vocal, verbal, amazing human being. Probably one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. That's who pops to my mind right away. So we should get Sean on the show.
Okay, fantastic. That'd be awesome. Now, we're going to be wrapping up here, but what I would like, Doug, is if you could please tell everyone, you can look into the camera and you can explain to them, please tell them where they can contact you, how they can contact you, name, phone number, address, whatever you feel is necessary so they can reach out.
All right, I'm Doug Miller. I'm the founder and creator at Zen Arts. You can find me at Zen Arts on Instagram or Doug at zenartsla.com. LinkedIn. I mean, we're on all the social media platforms. You can send us messages there. Or you can send me an email. Again, Doug at zenartsla.com and at Zen Arts Instagram.
Cool. And I just want to give him a shout out. I've hired Doug multiple times for events for me. I've sent him to friends, and just to give him a huge testimonial, like honestly, every party I've ever had him do has been one of the most memorable events of my life, some of the best nights of my life. So I just want to say thank you so much for being there. I had so much fun learning about you and your business and just how you're basically living the fullest expression of who you are as an individual. It's really inspiring. I love you, brother, and thanks for your time today.
Love you too, man. Thank you so much. Thanks,
Cool.
Joe.